talk series. As you know, we have been having some outstanding speakers from our area, and featuring them here. So we had approached our former councilman Rudy Garza as soon as his tenure was up. I had asked him if he can be a luncheon speaker, and since the luncheon series is not yet on the horizon, I requested him if he can do the Zoom talk, and he very quickly agreed. And I wanted him to share his leadership experiences, his view of our community. He had such an insider leadership view of our city and our surrounding areas, and such major influence on us. As you know, Mr. Garza served as city council member at large until October last year. He was first elected to the city council in November of 2012, representing District 5, where I was at that time, and a position to which he was re-elected twice in 2014 and 2018. And then he got elected into an at-large seat. And in addition to serving Corpus Christi Regional Economic Development Corporation and numerous other city corporations, Mr. Garza also served as the chairperson of the City Council's Municipal Court Committee, which he actually ended up chairing, I think. Yeah, and he was also on many boards, including Nueces County Tax Appraisal District and Planning Commission, which was a very important position that he held. And we are very, very fortunate to have him now lending his leadership to the field of education. And the Del Mar Board of Regents proudly welcomed him as the latest regent after he stepped out of the city council. And so with all those dimensions of his leadership, I'm very proud to welcome Mr. Garza and share his insights with us in a conversation. So he will first speak, for about 30-35 minutes. And those of you who have questions ready can then unmute your, just raise your hand and unmute your microphone and ask your questions, and then mute again. That way, Mr. Garza will have a clear microphone to all of us. So, without much ado, Mr. Rudy Garza. Thank you, Rudy.
First off, thank you very much, Nantha, for the very nice introduction, and I'd like to welcome everybody from the World Affairs Council. It's been my pleasure to serve on the board of directors of the World Affairs Council, and I love the organization and all the insight it brings on all the world affairs and all the great things happening in our nation, in our state, and certainly our city. Just to kind of give you a little background, I'll give you a little background on myself so you know where I'm coming from and why it is that I want to talk about governance from a critical managerial standpoint. I grew up in small business. My dad had a fireworks business, and then I went on to school, and then I started working in a semiconductor manufacturing plant. So my background's in manufacturing. I worked for Semtech Corporation, had a local plant right there next to the airport. And eventually when I finished all I could do here, I got transferred to California. And I ended my career as a global logistics manager for Semtech. We had assembly operations all over the Far East, and we shipped bulk of our product from different ship centers that we had, both in the Philippines, in Malaysia, and certainly here in the U.S., Texas, and Mexico. When I retired from Semtech, which roughly about 20 years ago, I came back to Corpus Christi because I had gone to California for a couple of years where I met my wife, Melinda. And I came back to Corpus Christi, and I had the opportunity to start serving on boards and commissions. And I had the county leadership, some of the commissioners asked me where I might want to serve on a county level, and I signed up to serve on the tax appraisal district. And then I was asked by a city councilman where I might want to serve, and I chose the Building Standards Board because I thought that that was an area that impacted the quality of life in so many neighborhoods. And so that's where I chose to serve. Serving on the Building Standards Board for the city, which I'm going to focus on the city, my city service. I noticed that we did certain code enforcement officers had great success in being able to take their cases to the ultimate level, which was to get the area or the property cleaned up the way it's supposed to be cleaned up, either by just yard cleanup or by demolition is the extreme measure. And others didn't. They would bring them to the board and they would be turned down. And there were not any processes that were properly documented so that we had a predictable or repetitive result. And that was a big concern that I had serving on the Building Standards Board. Fast forward from my time on the Building Standards Board going into the Planning Commission. The challenges on the Planning Commission was that we had people that were ready and willing to invest in the community, open up businesses, possibly do multi-family projects, and often that they would go to our development services group and the projects would die there. Either staff would recommend against rezoning a particular property that had all the necessary ingredients for be able to succeed and not create any havoc for the neighbors, and they would recommend against rezoning. So we had a lot more, I'm going to say, influence as a board on the Planning Commission to be able to start to open up and help the development, particularly in a lot of the open spaces on the south side. If you look at all the economy and all the things that are happening on the south side, it's due, in my opinion, to a lot more, I'm going to say, liberal zoning changes and acceptance of or minor tweaks in order to be able to get those properties developed and to get that investment into our areas. So again, I think that we did some great work on the Planning Commission with so many great commissioners that served alongside the commissions that I served on, and with change and I'm going to say a culture change in the planning and zoning group to look for ways to be able to give folks that were willing to invest the ability to be able to a solution to be able to come in and make those tracts of land work for the purpose of which the investors were looking to do. So it kind of gives you a little background of some stuff I did before I got on the council. Beginning my talk, I want to first off say, Sharon, I know there's going to be some positions that I'm going to take that you might not find favor in, but I first want to say that we have about 3,000 employees at the city of Corpus Christi. Those 3,000 employees are dedicated to making sure that we have the basic services that the city of Corpus Christi provides, and that only the city of Corpus Christi can provide. You just cannot go and get them in the private sector. They provide water, good quality water. They provide the collection of our wastewater. They provide the storm water when it rains. They provide all the solid waste pickup to provide decent streets for us to drive on. And so every day that they go to work, they provide a service that we don't recognize until it's not there or until something goes wrong, whether it be a storm, a hurricane, a winter storm, or some sort of, I'm going to say, boil water action that's required because of something that maybe didn't meet state standards. But every day that things go right, there's somebody out there working to make sure that the city of Corpus Christi delivers those services that I'm going to say, entrust to those employees. So again, having said that, I admire the hard work that all our city employees do. And thank you, Sharon, for your contribution to the city of Corpus Christi in the area that you contribute to. Again, I talked about my background because most of it is managerial. In the area where I worked at Semtech, I was responsible for the billing dollars. How many dollars of shipments did we get out the door? We had a goal, whether it be $400,000 or $4 million or $10 million in shipments. It was my responsibility to see that goal. So as a planner, as a production person, it was my experience to try to take and remove all the obstacles from all the people that were working for the organization so that we met those ship dollars goals. So again, when I'm referring back to managerial approach, it's in management, regardless of what entity you work for or what organization or what business, at the end of the day, it's all about results. Are we getting the results that the public is expecting? Are we getting the results that the council expects? Are we getting the results that the city manager expects of our entity, of our government? And so again, I got to serve on the council under 4 city managers. And shortly before I got on, there was another city manager that served when Rudy was there. So I have, because of my time on the planning commission also and the bill standard boards, I got a chance to see, I'm going to say, some of the shortcomings and some of the things that we didn't know that we were lacking in terms of a city, in terms of trying to accomplish our mission. So the initial challenges that we had is that in 2010, there was a report that came out that we needed to invest about $1 billion in our roads. Our streets and our roads were in terrible shape, and we needed to, from the community, from the committee that they formed, we had about $1 billion worth of investment that we had to make in our roads. And so previous council, before I came on, they started working on a plan to be able to go out and generate the dollars that we needed in order to be able to start to improve our road system. And that's infrastructure, certainly, infrastructure challenge. Shortly after I got on the council, and probably it came up before I got on the council, we came up with an issue that we had that looming over our heads that's coming to a resolution here shortly, if it hasn't already. It has to do with our wastewater, with how we were collecting our wastewater and how we were treating the treatment of our, or the condition of our wastewater treatment plants. That again was in the realm of about $1 billion, right? And if your aging infrastructure, streets and wastewater are in poor condition, guess what? Right before I left, we come to the realization that, hey, guys, we probably have close to $1 billion in water distribution issues that we're going to have to address over the coming years, right? And so, not to scare anybody, we've come to a point where we've already recognized what we think that the rate impact is going to be, and it's not as great as it could have been had we not started addressing it as early as we did, and been able to spread out the improvements we have to make with the EPA. But those are all the basic services that our city had to provide. Now, initially, the first discussion, the first negative is, oh, geez, where are we going to find the money? We don't have that kind of money, right? Well, the reality is that we started to work toward finding monies, which initially if you remember, shortly after I got elected, not my doing, certainly the council members before I got on, but even before I got on, they started working on aggressive bond programs every 2 years, over 10 years, in order to be able to address the reconstruction of arterials. All the main thoroughfares that we had, that was already in the works, and we just continued the work that was done by previous council members. The next step was to see how we're going to address the maintenance of our local streets. How are we going to maintain them, not the reconstruction part, but just maintain them so they last the 30 years that the life's supposed to be the life expectancy. Now, so we adopted the street user fee. First off, let me say, I didn't vote for the street user fee. I know we needed it. I'm glad that we passed it, that it passed by the council, but it was just a difference of opinion in how the actually cost was distributed among the small business owners. And I've been an advocate of small business on the council and previous boards all the time that I've been serving. So we adopted and we generated we got some additional contributions from the industrial sector and via the industrial district contributions and what they were paying in terms of tax, ad valorem tax valuation. And so we got about another $4.5 million there. And so again, we increased our revenue or revenues for an expenditure of about $30 million on street maintenance, right? So you've got all the components. You've got the components and bonds for reconstructing arterials. We still didn't address the residential street yet, right? But we addressed the arterials. We addressed the maintenance, which was a continuing exercise that we're going to have to continue from now to eternity to try to fix the streets. I mean, to keep the streets in good condition, the ones that we had already repaired, and those were in good condition. But so I found us, once we had the revenue, we were having difficulty executing. We started having issues. We lost our director of engineering. He left to another community. We seemed to be struggling. And again, we were not out there actually executing. By the time that our present city manager came in, we had fallen well behind on our capital projects, which was mostly streets, right? And in the first year, his budget ballooned from about $850 million to about 1.2 billion dollars. But most of that was revenue and monies that we already had that we were just not spending in order to be able to prove. So that we had some managerial issues that we had, without naming them. Of course, we had the city manager that was there when I first got there was Ron Olson. And then we had, when he walked off the job suddenly in the middle of a water boil, then we had Margie Rose willing to take over the helm of the city manager's job. And then after Margie Rose left, then we had Keith Selman, and now we're to Peter Zanoni. And Peter Zanoni came with a great deal of experience from San Antonio, came with a background and a performance, a results-oriented performance. And since Peter's come aboard, which has now been, I'm thinking this coming May is going to be 2 years. So it's probably been about a year and 10 months. The first year in their budget, they were proposing that they were going to spend all the capital dollars that we had in bond dollars approved in order to be able to get our streets, and the dollars that we were behind on street maintenance programs. We fell behind 2 years on street maintenance programs after we had the monies already generated through the street user fee. So, I mean, it really comes down, and from a managerial standpoint, as a city council member, right? We have the council manager form of government. So we set policy, we set a vision, a direction of the city, but it's up to for the city manager to rally his troops and figure out how it is that they're going to be able to execute whatever plans have been laid out in order to be able to deal with issues, deal with problems. And I know that I've heard from some folks within the city realm that that he's hard to deal with. He expects results. He holds people accountable. He's made a lot of changes at the leadership levels. Possibly, I see good diversity from an ethnic or racial standpoint. I think there's still some work that needs to be done from a gender standpoint, because most of the people in leading positions, we don't have, but maybe 1 or 2 females in leadership positions. And I think that that's an opportunity. There's an opportunity there to do some things better. But I think that the team that Peter's brought in is now putting the city in a position to be able to do things better. In the time that I was on the planning commission and on the city, we started working. One of the things that I brought and that I had to consider strengths from my own background that I thought I could push at the city level was documentation. I think that department to department, the documentation there were huge swings in the level of documentation that you had. At Centec, the company I worked for, we worked for years on getting um, getting ISO 9000 certified so that you could have some predictability and some repeatability in the way that your product is actually manufactured and delivered so that your customers can rely on the quality of your product. And in the city, there was a lot of departments that didn't have the documentation they needed so that uh, you could get that level of performance from one employee to another, from one code enforcement a member to another, from one planner to another. And so I think that documentation was greatly lacking. We started, if you know, maybe over the last 20 years that I served on, one of the largest complaints of all the city departments was development services. That's the department that's supposed to facilitate the development and the investment in our area, right? And a lot of companies that came in and did one project in Corpus Christi decided they weren't going to come back because it was just too difficult to deal with the city of Corpus Christi and development services. And they, including my son, who took over development service for a number of months before he left, we just could not seem to turn the corner. And while I was serving on the council, I'm serving on the planning commission first, the council, we developed something called the UDC, Universal Development Code. There was a book, big, thick book that governed every single aspect of developing properties or opening businesses in Corpus Christi. And it was something that you could hand or they could download from the internet to people that were interested in possibly doing business in Corpus Christi so that they knew exactly what they could expect in coming over here and doing a project in Corpus Christi. And I still think that there's certain departments that I think lack the documentation they need. They're getting there, but we didn't have it. And it didn't, with so many things to address, so many things to put out, it was difficult. And when you think in terms of dollars, it's a shame when we get the budget, for instance, we have about, right now, this last year, about $759 million operating budget and about another $250 million in capital budgets. Those are means improvements that are going to be made via our infrastructure, roads, utilities, and buildings, and everything else the city has to invest in. And if those projects are not properly managed, or there's not a way for them to follow a process, then we're going to lose dollars. I think that so often we were at the city, we were penny wise and pound foolish, right? Some of the criticisms that I recently heard about Peter Zanonis, he's brought in some of the folks that are an executive team, and he's paying them high salaries. And historically, we hadn't paid those kind of high salaries, right? But if, say for instance, I'm gonna use two examples, Richard Martinez and Rolando Mata. Richard Martinez we hired from Fort Worth. Rolando Mata we hired from City San Antonio. The biggest complaint everybody has and that makes to the city council is the streets, right? Both of them were brought in for streets, right? I'm sure we paid higher salaries than we historically had to pay, but with some of the things that they're doing now, including they took a machine that they had for doing overlays on streets that they could just stabilize the base and come in with a new layer. $300,000 machine was sitting in the corner of the garage there in the facilities department. And they pulled that out, invested $20,000 to get it operational, trained the staff to be able, our workers or street workers, street crews to be able to use it. And now we're doing a lot of overlays. And they were doing such a good job, right? In addressing so many streets that they went out and hired another machine, another $300,000. And before, there was no monies to do that. Well, guess what? When the city uses its own crews and bypasses having to have everything engineered and over-engineered, there's huge cost savings. Instead of spending 18 or 20% of that particular, I'm going to say, program or project's budget on engineering, you're putting it in asphalt, right? And so if you look at your pocketbook, the dollars that the tax rates have increased have been strictly related to increases that were voted by the taxpayer for starting to put some monies toward the reconstruction and the improvement of residential streets. So I think that we're headed in the right direction. I am sorry that it took us as long as it took us to get here. I think I have to credit, like, again, keep in mind that all the services that I talked about earlier were being delivered in that time, but the critical elements in order to continue delivering those services weren't being addressed, right? We had started to talk about streets. We had started to negotiate the wastewater issues, and just now they're talking about the water issues and making our water distribution systems more robust. Um, I think that besides infrastructure with the city, one of the complaints and one of the concerns that most folks had, certainly at your position over at the university, Dr. Babili, is opportunities for young people. How are we going to keep some of our talent here? How do you avoid brain drain? Well, quite frankly, there were some investments made and some strategies made after Ron Kitchens, which was the biggest, I'm going to say, the last time that we weren't moving in a direction that we needed to move in order to take advantage of all the opportunities, but potential opportunities for our community. After Roland Maurer came aboard, started saying, okay, hey, what is it that we need in order to be able to attract high-paying jobs? You have to have water, right? And when city council was already working on Mary Roads Phase 2. Have to have a labor force that you can either train or is already highly skilled. And I think our university, Del Mar College, certainly, the Craft Training Center, and the investments that the city council has made in those areas has led us to be able to train, even ahead of the opportunity to start training our workforce, to be able to have more welders, to be able to build those industrial plants that were being invested in alongside the port, and certainly invest in the process technology in partnerships with the industrial partners that were coming in, right? To be able to train the workforce and be able to offer a workforce that was going to be able to service or to work for those plants for years to come. So I think on the EDC side, there's been some huge changes that have occurred that have prepared this community to be able to take that part of the equation out of the concern side for potential employers, for people making a big, huge, and not to underscore and the fact that, of course, the Eagle Shale and all the abundance of energy in this area and things coming out of this region, right, made it easier for them to be able to consider this region as an area to be able to invest in. I think the port, the forward-thinking steps that the port's taking in investing and improving the ship channel and making sure that whatever's going to be needed for vessels or vessels that are going to want to be able to load to a larger degree without being concerned about the depth and the inner harbor, I think is huge, is huge for being able to continue to bring those opportunities to Corpus Christi. But those opportunities also mean that the city also has to step up and figure out how we're going to continue to address potential droughts and potential water shortages that we might have, or water concerns that other potential employers are going to bring. So those have been the challenges of just recent past and the present. I think that nobody anticipated, of course, the downturn right now in COVID-19. I think it's temporary. I think some projects that we saw on the table that we were looking to be done in this region have kind of been just delayed, or until we see our way past this COVID-19, that the actual consumption of the energy products that'll be coming out of this region are going to be marketable, are going to be necessary, needed. I think that every employee that we have at the city wants to go and they want to do a good job, and they want to make sure that the citizens are happy with the performance. I think that our weaknesses have been in our leadership or our higher managerial positions have just not delivered to their employees and open the door. I think one of the things that I saw by going to so many employee recognition meetings that they human resources would put on these meetings where they recognized employees of the city that went on to get continuing education and to get their certifications, and that did extra effort to try to help a citizen or customer in their efforts to deal with the city. And I think that we had some great talent that I saw in those meetings that I didn't see their upper managers or directors or department heads elevating them to positions where they could make a difference, where they could make a larger contribution than they were making. I think that they were, I don't know if they were shackled or cuffed or what the story was, but I think that you're only as good, you're only as successful as your employees that are underneath you. And the more that you give those employees that you know have the right attitude, have a good pace. One of the things that Rudy talked about when he left the city of Corpus Christi and went into CPS Energy, he talked about that the CEO that hired him said, one of the things that I like about the way you work is that you've got great skills, and everybody that's got the right education, the right experience has great skills. But the biggest thing that I recognize and what you bring to the company is your pace. The pace at which you address, problems and come up with a solution is greater than I've seen in a lot of the employees that we have in our organization. Again, as a father, it's great to be able to brag about your kids, but that's one of the things that I think that may have been lacking in previous city managers and the staff that they had underneath them, is that they didn't know how to recognize pace and be comfortable with giving them enough latitude and empowering them to go in and make the biggest contribution they could to the organization. Challenges that I had while I was on the council, of course, in our council manager form of government, the challenges are not overstepping your bounds. You can't go in and micromanage. You can't go in and say, I need this today. Everything has to be asked. You got to go through the right channels. It's a bureaucratic environment, quite frankly. And it's a good thing that there were a lot of employees that reached out, and Rudy, if you need something, call me. And I had a good working relationship with all the city managers that said, hey, Rudy, whatever you're doing is fine. I haven't heard any complaints. I haven't heard you being disrespectful to anybody, and everybody seems to have been comfortable working with you. So I never had someone complain and come back to me about some of the things we were trying to do from a city level that we would try to push a little bit in order to be able to get some urgency, right? And so that makes it challenging. It makes it very, very hard to be able to accomplish all the things that you would like to accomplish. But having said that, I talked about streets a lot and the things that are now being done in streets. In about maybe third or fourth year of my serving, we pushed the council at that time, and it was a 5-4 vote. And we pushed to set up a street committee in order to try to determine why our cost of reconstructing streets and maintaining streets was so high. And again, we got a lot of pushback from council members and leadership that was on the council previously, and those of us that wanted to see if we could come up with better ideas on how we might be able to do the job. We got criticized by the Caller Times that said, hey, you're overstepping your bounds. You're not supposed to get in there and micromanage. They're the professionals. They're the ones that are supposed to do this, right? But if you don't have the right talent or the right urgency, then you're not going to get to where you need to get. And the only employee that we hire we hire the city manager, and it's up to the city manager to put the right pieces in place. Uh, and so, again, that's the reason why, more than most people are comfortable with, we changed our city leadership as many times as we did. Uh, Looking and going forward, we're going to be challenged. Uh, we're still not ahead of the curve. Corpus Christi is growing at a very fast rate. I'm concerned. I've always been pro-growth, and I've talked about development services and the obstacles we had in trying to turn that department around and trying to help people that were wanting to invest in our community. I am, like Marty is, concerned about the fact that we've got a carcass, which is our inner Corpus Christi area, Roy Miller area, the inner city, that is being abandoned for the green fields and the new town, London and South Side. And for years, I actually represented the South Side. And then I came back and ran at large when I moved over here uptown. And one of the things that kind of led me to move toward the at-large seat, besides the fact that I was changing in residency, was the fact that by some folks on the South Side that had their way for so many years, right? When I talked about downtown issues and I talked about the inner city and things that we need to do to foster reinvestment in the older core, they're saying, Rudy, you represent the South Side. You need to look after our interests. Why is it that you're taking up causes or issues related to the West Side or downtown or uptown? But the reality is that if there's not a huge disparity in your economic position or your quality of life, then you're going to be safe in your beautiful areas and beautiful subdivisions or suburbs, on the outlying areas. But if there's discontent in the center, then you're going to find problems like you could have had in cities or communities like Ferguson or Baltimore. And so you've got to start addressing to figure out how it is you're going to improve the conditions in your inner cities, right? And so when we took steps to facilitate infrastructure across the OSO without putting certain handcuffs on it, I think we took away potential opportunities for reinvestment in our inner core. And I think that that's going to be something that's going to have to be addressed. And I don't know that the current council and current leadership has the appetite to address it, because it all sounds great. All the big homes and all the beautiful areas are getting developed in the southern areas, but we don't have the traffic issues that San Antonio and Dallas and Austin have. We don't have the obstacle that it takes an hour and a half or 2 hours to go back and forth from work. You can be over in the South Side, you can be in London and still get downtown in 15 minutes. And so because of the way our city is set up, and because of all the good work that the MPO and the city has done in making sure that our thoroughfares operate properly and that we build them before they become congested, we don't have traffic as an incentive to locate closer to the workplace. So we're going to have to find different elements to be able to incentivize redevelopment in the inner core. And I think the EDC is well positioned to continue to bring job opportunities for our young folks. And I think as those young folks stay here and get experience, we may eventually find real diamonds, right? Someone that may create an opportunity, like through the drone program, somebody to come up with a company like Dell or Compact or Gateway or those type of companies, an Amazon, right, or Samsung, that might be able to do something and want to do it here in Corpus Christi, because it's so much easier to now operate a business regardless of where you are in the world. We have great natural resources. I love Corpus Christi. I came back to invest in Corpus Christi. I came back to serve all the different entities that I served because I love Corpus Christi. There's no place like it in the whole world. I've had the opportunity. I've been blessed that I've been able to travel, and I love the city I live in. I love the people, and I think that our future is extremely bright. And I think that we have great educational institutions that prepare our young people to be able to live a better life than their parents lived. So with that, I'll end my talk and I can open it up for questions. Thank you.
Can I start off questions? Rudy, we have been seeing in many cities the relationship between the city, the community, and its police departments. Okay. How do you, from your point of view, how do you rate the health of our community and our relations with the police and policing, and different sorts of dimensions of the problems that we are seeing across the country? Just from your point of view, how is the governance and how is the police and courts, and since you have served on the municipal court and things like that, just give us your opinions on that, please.
Well, first off, I'm glad you asked that question because I had it on my list of things to talk about. And just to give you a little background, right? Years ago, I remember when Rudy was serving the city of Corpus Christi, I can't remember who the police chief that retired, but it may have been Bauman, but we had Chief Brian Smith became chief. And we seem to have like 3 different factions in our police department, depending on who you talk to, right? And I'm not going to mention the 3 names, but there were 3 different captains or commanders in the police department. And after the chief left, there was a split about who should have been the next chief, right? And through his own issues, in fact, there were some issues that we had at the impound lot. There were some civil rights violated by the city of Corpus Christi's police department in vehicles that they impounded and they later auctioned off, right? And I know for a fact that that happened because my son was almost the victim of that happening to his vehicle, right? And so, and then there was an FBI investigation. They were looking for people to come forward and talk about the experiences that they had related to those improprieties with the police department. Well, guess what? After Brian resigned or was let go, the city manager at the time went out and got Troy Riggs. All our police chiefs before had been homegrown, had been developed through the police department, through the ranks. Went out and got Troy Riggs. Troy Riggs came in with a totally different attitude and different concept of policing, right? And he did great strides, but he wasn't here long enough. Troy Riggs, with his talent, became and eventually was promoted to an assistant city manager at the same time Rudy was assistant city manager, right? And Troy Riggs then, with his administrative experience and his desire to get back into basically the trenches, right? Then took a job up in Indianapolis, right? I think it's first Louisville, and then he went on to Indianapolis. And that created the opportunity, and to his credit, Ron Olson went out and he hired Floyd Simpson. And Floyd Simpson was a great communicator. He was everybody's best friend, right? And in police people, personnel, and particularly in the upper ranks of the police departments, they had the military, right, persona that you do not talk to me, you do not address me like that. And Chief Simpson was nothing like that. Always a great smile, always willing to engage, always approachable, right? Didn't want you to go through other people. He wanted you to call him direct. I mean, God rest his soul, he was a great communicator and he was a great friend. And he took us from here to here in a very short period of time. And I'm not giving those compliments because of the fact that he's deceased. It's just the truth, right? He's a great person, right? And then after we lost Chief Simpson, Chief Markle, we hired Chief Markle. And Chief Markle just took what he learned from Floyd and he he's a great communicator. He informs everybody, right? Same thing that Floyd did. And he goes to community meetings, whether people are really welcoming their what do you call it, their presence or not. And he'd go and tell them about what things are going on, things are concerned, what they can do. And again, I think most of it has to do with communication. And if you've got a police chief that cannot communicate and not have a relationship with the community, then you're going to have those kind of problems. And then, quite frankly, it's not just the communication and the relationship part. I think that you've got to take that back into your training. And so I think that so much of the training and so much of the cadet training and what they're trying to do now in terms of a new police academy and improve basically the atmosphere in which they're being brought into the fold, I think is going to pay huge dividends. Other communities that had the problems that they've had, we're just now looking at doing some of the things we need to do. I think one of the concerns that I had while I was on the council, we had probably three minorities that actually retired from a commander's position, right? And they weren't filled, initially they weren't filled with minorities. And some of your police force needs to be a mirror image of your community, right? You want to make sure you promote the most talented and the most gifted and the most experienced and those that you know are going to do the job. But you also have to have some that know how to deal with those, with that section of the community. And if you don't have an Hispanic, you don't have a Black in those positions, then you're shortchanging the things that you can do for the community from a policing standpoint, right?
Thank you, Rudy. Others, please. Anybody who has questions, just raise your hand and.
Yeah, I've got a
your mic.
question. I've got a question, Antha.
Sure, Don.
Can you hear me? Yeah. You know, it's not going to affect me, and I don't have any kids that live here. But, you know, my 50 years of law practice, my main clients were real estate developers.
Mhm.
And I'm really concerned about what's going on over on, or what they're trying to go on over on North Beach. You know, all of my clients dug their own canals and put in all their own infrastructure. And they didn't have a tax thing that where they gathered all the increase in, you know, in the market value that comes back to them through taxes. And I'm concerned that these developers are now taking more and more advantage of the communities. And somebody needs to pay attention to what's going on. And the only person in town I hear loudly that's doing that is David Loeb. I'm just wondering what you think about it.
Well, I've got a differing opinion on North Beach. I'm a proponent that I'm a champion of doing something out there. I've been all along, I've been a champion for infrastructure and investment in infrastructure. I think that's an area in the community that's been underserved for years and years. And I'm not talking about just the developer. Yes, yeah. If somebody wants to invest dollars out there, it's great. But there's also a solution. And the canals themselves will not fix the drainage issues in North Beach. You've got to do more than that, right? And so I think that initially my viewpoint was that let's go ahead and let's do everything we can and let's look at the options and figure out how it is that we're going to be able to fund this and do it. I think the approach that Peter's taking now related to doing this study and then doing this, and now we're going to do this, I think is the right approach before you bite off something that you're not going to be able to chew. Now, that area, North Beach, was a jewel a bunch of years ago. You could say that time has passed, but we have our main attractions in, if you discount just our natural attraction, which is Padre Island, you got two of our main attractions have been put out there in North Beach, which is the Lexington and the Texas State Aquarium. And I think that those are our showpieces. People come to see those particular attractions. And if everything else around it is trashy and is non-functional, then that's representative of what Corpus Christi is. Much like for most folks that just go to the border town of Juarez, they think that that's Mexico. And for those of us that have been to Cabo or been to Puerto Vallarta or Cancun, they know that the border isn't all of Mexico. Doesn't
Well,
represent
no,
all of it.
I agree with you. The Padre was my number one client for 20 years, the Padre project. But what I'm concerned about is I think it'd be wonderful to have somebody develop North Beach. Don't get me wrong. It'd be wonderful. I just don't know that the taxpayers should do it. That's my concern.
So you think, you know who the largest landowner is in North Beach? If something was to be solved out there, you know who the largest landowner is out there? The city of Corpus Christi.
Fine.
City of Corpus
So
Christi. So if the
what do they own there?
a bunch of the empty lots, a bunch of the land, 10% of the land in North Beach is owned by the city of Corpus Christi.
Well, I mean, they can join the developer doing it.
So if we were,
That's not what I see happening.
yeah. So if we find a solution for North Beach, and the solution adds value, and you're able to get investment, then the value of the land that Corpus Christi has out there, City of Corpus Christi has, will be able to be sold or developed in a way that's going to be beneficial to citizens of Corpus Christi. Now, when they talk about the TERS, just like downtown, right? Just like downtown, the TERS, money that they would otherwise
I'm
go.
sorry, you got cut off here.
Okay, money that would otherwise go to the city of Corpus Christi in terms of improvements goes into the TERS in order to continue to add to fixing the things that should have been kept up all along, right? Stormwater, certainly that's a, we'll say that's a service that the city provides across the city. And that's something that's not functional on North Beach right now. Right. And so
No, I
again,
understand that, but
same thing,
anyhow,
the future into the water.
that's my concern. It's not going to ever affect me.
Well, I think the debate, is a good debate, but in my opinion, you got to do something for the least of your, the least of your brothers, right? And that'd be North Beach.
Well, those are the people who own the land over there on North Beach are not the least of my brothers.
Ditto downtown.
Other
Right.
I had
questions?
another question though,
Oh, yeah.
which is, I don't know if I hate to
Go ahead, Don.
take,
Okay.
I have one more question. I am concerned about the state taking over the authority of the cities to run their cities. Is that something that you've thought about?
Yes, I have. I know that there's a bill there about talking about not allowing the cities to be able to have any lobbying efforts and not hire any lobbyists and people, and I've heard like in some circles that said, hey, yeah, they're hiring people so they can go out there and they can increase their taxes or their rates or their dues. And quite frankly, most of the lobbying efforts are made, and Rudy was in that realm. He was a lobbyist for the power companies and also for the city of Corpus Christi. And so much of the work they do is actually educating the legislators so that they know what side of the argument and why it is that this particular issue is important to the municipalities, right? And so I think it's important to have representation in Austin for your local entities, because each citizen, even a city councilman, is not going to be well versed enough on most issues or all issues to be able to go up there and make a good argument, right? And so when you talk about that, yeah, I think in some cases they paint the municipalities as the bad guy. They're the ones that are raising taxes. They're the ones. Well, again, if the state and the federal government are requiring you to do all these things, I talked about the EPA, I talked about TCEQ in terms of water quality. If all these things are mandated by the state and federal authorities, then where's the city going to get the funding if you don't get if you have all these unfunded mandates? You've got to do it somehow in order to continue to operate. And
I
so,
agree.
anyway,
I'm glad we agree on that, Rudy.
me too, Don. It makes it so much easier for me.
Okay, other questions, please?
Rudy, good evening. Randy Wright, City Manager in Portland. I just want to tell you thank you for your service. You've done such a great job on the City Council. Clearly, you have got a great understanding of the inner workings of the city. And we always say the devil is in the details. And,
Yes.
and the way cities operate, they can be intricate. And you clearly have gotten a great understanding of that. And I really appreciate your comments tonight. And I just want to tell you too that I appreciate all that you've done to promote relationships here in the Coastal Bend, and you've taken a regional approach to a lot of the economic development that has occurred here in the Coastal Bend, and we really appreciate that over here on the north side of the bridge.
Well, thank you, Randy, so much. And
I
I
think that's well said, Randy, well said.
thank you very much, Randy. And I appreciate all the efforts you're doing in Portland. You guys run a really good city, and I've been in and out of your office, and you got a great staff. So congratulations on what you guys are doing in Portland.
Okay, other questions? Yeah, Sylvia?
I have a question about development services. Is there any oversight of development services? We've had several instances where we've been neglected. I feel like if someone goes to development services and they pay for a permit, how long should it take for that permit to be either okayed or turned down? And what happens to letters that go to complain? Do they just go straight to the shredder?
To be honest with you, I don't know about letters. I do know that people that have had issues in development services typically call someone that knows. Like, again, we've got 2 new people that are, I'm going to say, charged with turning the department around. We got Al Raymond that we hired from the city of Austin, and I think he's doing a great job. And the approach that he takes is a really objective approach, and he'll try to find a way for you to do your project in a manner that makes sense. You can't just let everybody go out and do what they want to. And they've got another gentleman by the name of Michael Dice, and both of those are my go-to guys when I've got issues from constituents that can't get what they need to get done. I remember I had a gentleman who was a contributor to one of my campaigns. We were friends and we worked at the same company, Semtech. He actually worked for me. So I must have been a pretty good boss because and he donated to my campaign, right? After I'm running, this is a former employee of mine. So, and Ted worked for, or actually managed a company here called Jet Services. They did oil field equipment type stuff, valves and that kind of stuff. And they were trying to get a paint shop opened up, right? That they wanted, and their permits and everything they're trying to do kept getting turned down. And he called me, he said, Rudy, he says, you think you could help me with just set up a meeting so we can get this thing resolved? Well, it came down to, they called a meeting, development service got together. He had hired like a consultant to help him get the permits, go through the permitting process. And the consultant was adamant that he wasn't going to pay a particular fee or do something that was going to cost. And it was like $1,500. It wasn't a big dollar amount. And this friend of mine who was anxious to get the shop open was threatening to move and locate the shop over in Taft or Sinton because he couldn't get things done here in Corpus Christi, right? Turns to his consultant and said, $1,500, we're losing $15,000 a month by not having the shop open. Are you crazy? We'll do that tomorrow, right? We're gonna do it, right? So he had to, right, set his consultant straight because the issue was the consultant had taken a certain position with staff over it, right? And often staff, if they don't know, or they've been put into a position that they're not knowledgeable enough about what's involved, they take a position and they want to hold staff, hold fast in their position. And quite frankly, it takes elevating the conversation or the discussion to either the party who's doing the development or the city managerial staff so that they can look at the issue and say, okay, yeah, maybe you don't want to do that, and this is what you're asking to do, but this might be a good compromise. And so they'll come up with something that will work. It might not be as costly for you as you thought it might be. So if you've got an issue, I can certainly put you in contact with the right person. Okay.
So is that Michael Dyes and Al Raymond? Is that who you
Yeah,
say?
yeah, Michael Dyson, Al Raymond, yes. And usually you usually go in, when you go in there to apply for your permit, there's a project manager, right? That's assigned to your particular request. And that project manager should be the person that can get you the answers and say yes or no. And if they can't, then you've got to elevate it to, okay, who's the supervisor of these project managers? And then you elevate it to their level. And if you can't get to where you need to get, then you got to call myself or a city councilman. I'm no longer a city councilman, but I still got friends there that promise they'll help me anywhere I need some help. Okay.
Okay,
And
thank
I'm
you.
sorry that you're having the difficulty you're having. Anybody else?
Other questions? Well, Rudy, I want to echo Randy's sentiments. We are deeply grateful for your service to our community and to our city and our region. And we are eternally in debt of your generous time and resources that you brought to the position on the city council. And we really appreciate all of your contributions to our way of life, our quality of life. And thank you for caring about our community. And I know you'll continue to will work with the city and all the community to make our region more successful and enjoyable. So I really appreciate that, Rudy. If anybody has final remarks, fine. Otherwise, I want to just thank you and wish you all the success in the future of your service to our state and our region. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you, Rudy. And thank you, Marty and Anantha, for organizing us and
Thank you.
keeping these things going.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend.
Rudy, and you did
Thank
not,
you, Rudy.
that upset me. You said everything right.
Okay, I didn't know if you agreed or disagreed with me, but I'm glad. I wanted to hear your feedback or your remarks. So thank you so much. It makes me feel so good.
Thank you.
Right.